I'll be introducing Safa Mohammed. Safa Mohammed is a project coordinator at the City of Hope's tobacco cessation program. She earned her bachelor's degree in biopsychology from the University of California, Santa Barbara. While interning and working with the County of Santa Barbara Health Department's Tobacco Prevention and Cannabis Education Program. At City of Hope, she continues to encourage diverse community members' involvement in tobacco-related health education and cessation activities in hopes of fostering a healthy, well-informed environment. Next, I'll be introducing Safi Shi. She's the program coordinator at Asian Pacific Partners for Empowerment, Advocacy, and Leadership, where she supports national efforts to advance tobacco prevention and cancer control in Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities. As a native Mandarin speaker with roots in cross-cultural communication, Safi brings a deeply community-centered approach to her public health work. Safi holds a Master of Public Health and Global Epidemiology from Emory University Rollins School of Public Health, and a Bachelor of Science in Cognitive and Behavioral Neuroscience from UC San Diego. Her experience spans research, community program development, and data-driven health communication across nonprofit and international settings. Driven by commitment to community health, Safi is passionate about empowering diverse communities with the knowledge and tools to lead healthier, tobacco-free lives. Next is Joseph Hayden. Joseph Hayden, he's a senior IT program manager in the Enterprise Technology Group at City of Hope. Joseph has extensive experience working at United Healthcare, John Moore Health, and Stanford School of Medicine. He also taught at New York University and Touro College. He holds a law degree from Brooklyn Law School, as well as a bachelor's degree in political science from City University of New York. Joseph is passionate about combating the normalization of commercial tobacco use within groups like LGBTQ minus tobacco in the San Francisco Bay Area. For many years, Joseph has worked pro bono, traveling nationally and continuing to do advocacy about the global devastation brought on by the tobacco industry, particularly regarding the effect on the LGBTQ plus and other targeted populations. Please welcome Joseph Hayden.
Joseph will be joining us virtually from the Bay Area in California. I will commence with his presentation. Joseph, are you able to see the screen and unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Joseph Hayden. I'm honored to be invited here by my amazing co-worker, Sophia Young. I've been attending her meetings for years now at work. And I learned very early on that marginalized communities were of little value to big tobacco. In the early 1990s, when I was still a law student, I started writing articles in the law school newsletter or newspaper about the insidious industry and was told, you can't fight a tidal wave. Well, I wasn't alone, and that often meant, and that doesn't mean that we should remain silent. Health equity has been a very important element of my activism. I got this diagram here from the Truth Initiative, which is a great source. Anytime I observe demographic health inequity, my conclusion is that it's due to tobacco industry targeting tactics. I've always thought globally about this issue whenever advocates would make some inroads into tobacco control here in the United States, the industry would just move on to its next target. This was exemplified one time, which I distinctly remember, shortly after the United States banned big tobacco from sponsoring events like the Virginia Slims tennis tournament, which I protested at. The industry just picked up where it left off by sponsoring music events throughout Asia to addict new populations and acquire fresh victims. I mean customers. Okay, thank you for moving to the next slide. This is some about, oh no, go ahead if you can go back, please. This are some of my speaking engagements on tobacco. I like to say that my biggest credential is being a loudmouth about this subject. I was on a panel at the second annual Endgame Summit last summer in Chicago. That was hosted by Action on Smoking and Health. I gave a continuing education presentation at City of Hope on campus for the Pride Health Symposium a year ago. Last week at the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco, I advocated for smoke-free bar patios, which has been in the news a lot here. I also regularly speak at City Council and environment justice forums about tobacco retail licenses and smoke-free multi-unit housing, especially here in the Bay Area. Okay, please go to the next slide. Lest anyone think that I have something against people who smoke, the whole reason I got into this was because I lost close loved ones much too soon to their tobacco addiction. These are all my family members who died very young. In particular, I want to point out my cousin who died at age 35 from osteosarcoma, which he developed in his pelvis. He traveled much of the last 6 years of his life. He was diagnosed at 29 and tried a lot of experimental treatments in various countries to no avail, unfortunately. And of course, there's me with my father, who died at 50 from his years of suffering from his tobacco addiction, and unfortunately, his own mother died at the same age at 50. So that's a family tradition I definitely don't want to continue. Next slide, please. Every tobacco activist, I find, has a curmudgeon who approaches us with an anecdote like, but my grandmother smoked every day until she was in her 90s. So this is my response to that. You can also survive by putting on a blindfold and running across the freeway, but why would one? All right, next slide, please. So I coined the phrase peddlers pushing poison because I really think it's important to call tobacco, commercial tobacco, what it is. I like the alliteration, but the statistics here are what really drive me crazy and keep me up at night. So we're in California, where 40,000 of our fellow Californians die of tobacco-related illness every single year, 480,000 Americans, and 8 million people globally, because 20% of the world is addicted to tobacco, unfortunately. Next slide, please. So the racist quotes on this slide are almost too difficult for me to read out loud. If you can't read the text there, it says, Big Tobacco decided Asian Americans were a profitable target due to their, quote, genetic predisposition to smoking. I don't even know what the hell that means. And the other graphic here is an important quote that was part of an expose many years ago from a model who was in these ads, quoting an RJR executive who said, "We don't smoke that shit, we just sell it. We reserve the right to smoke for the young, the poor, the black, and the stupid." Next slide, please. So cigarette filters are they're made of non-biodegradable plastic, and they are the most littered item on Earth. I asked many of the youth who may not have experience with tobacco-related illness in their families to get engaged for the environmental reasons also. So despite a little progress that we have made, we still have a very long way to go. Next slide, please. I like to point out also the true costs of smoking. Tobacco industry was up in arms when prices, minimum price per pack was set. But a $10 price pack is nothing compared to what it really costs our society, which is much closer to $40 a pack. And every Californian, regardless of whether they smoke or not, pays $487 a year for the cost it is to our society. And tobacco industry does spend a lot of money, $500 million a year, excuse me, just in California, where smoking has actually gone down tremendously, to try to get their deadly products sold. Next slide, please. Another thing that keeps me up at night is that many of us have retirement plans and investments in what are called diversified funds. But what I try to point out is that diversified funds very often include tobacco stock. So since we come to work every day fighting tobacco and diabetes, I think it's important that we make sure that our retirement funds aren't putting 1 cent into these industries. So it's not always easy to do, and not everyone has the financial literacy to do it. but I think that our retirement plans in particular, should be based on sustainable funds, and that we should have the option to do that very easily. So I encourage everyone to think about that because, as you can see here, the American Medical Association, American Lung Association, and other companies that fight cancer all the time had to do a about face and make sure that their own retirement plans weren't inadvertently investing in this industry. Next slide, please. So I'm glad I'm not the first person to talk about RFK Jr. today, but these are difficult times. The White House Chief of Staff is actually a current tobacco industry lobbyist. Reynolds just made a huge contribution to Ballroom this past week, and they got an invitation to Mar-a-Lago, and they're actively trying to influence the administration to ease up on flavored vapes, which end up unfortunately being very attractive to the youth, and the youth is a demographic that tobacco industry is looking to addict. I don't know if you're able, Safa, to play the video there, but this is a video of RFK Jr. During a congressional hearing. He's actually popping a nicotine pouch into his mouth on live TV, trying to be discreet. And he puts it in his cheek. And there's plenty of evidence that he is buying them because he's been photographed outside of stores carrying the Zyn packages, and he has actually recently started endorsing nicotine pouches. Next slide, please. So, I am constantly upset at the product placement of these combustible cigarettes, and in particular the one on the right bothers me. The original avatar had Sigourney Weaver playing a medical doctor in an exam room, by the way, on a spaceship hundreds of years in the future, smoking a cigarette. What could possibly go wrong? And even more recently, this Netflix series called Three Body Problem had all these PhD students in London. This is a modern era. It took place in the 1940s, but you'll notice that the protagonists are all smoking. They linger on the protagonists' beautiful faces. None of them ever cough. And when the director of this series was asked why he had all the smoking going on the screen, he said he couldn't figure out what the actors would do with their hands. To which I respond, maybe he needs to go back to directing school, and the same thing goes for James Cameron and his Avatar. Next slide, please. So, as Sophia and I have discussed numerous times, vaping devices are not a smoking cessation device. Despite what the current administration might want to push, the FDA has never approved an e-cigarette. And the problem with these devices are that they may have started off with lower amounts of nicotine, but now, of course, they can. The customers were demanding, more, and unfortunately, the industry was willing to provide. So, one vape device can have the equivalent of 400 cigarettes. All right, next slide, please.
Wow, thank you
Oh, that
so
was it.
much.
Yeah, thank you for letting me fire hose you with all this information. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you again, Joseph. That was such a wonderful. That was a wonderfully passionate presentation, and we look forward to hearing more about your experience shortly during our panel. I will move on to Safi. She is joining us from Atlanta, Georgia, virtually. And if you'd like to continue or commence your presentation, that would be wonderful.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Safi. I'm the CAPE Program Coordinator at APPEAL, the Asian Pacific Partners for Empowerment, Advocacy, and Leadership. I'm joining you virtually from Atlanta, Georgia. I think it's truly an honor to be here with you today. Next slide, please. APEAL is a national organization advancing health for Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities. I coordinate CAPE program, one of 9 CDC-funded national networks supported by the CDC Division of Cancer Prevention and Control, which is focused on commercial tobacco prevention and cancer control across all 50 states and 6 U.S. associated Pacific Island territories. Everything we do is community rooted, and that community lens is exactly what I want to bring our topic today. Next slide, please. Thank you. When people hear tobacco and Asian Americans, they often assume the risk is low, but the hidden impact tells a very different story. Tobacco is a known driver of cancer, lung cancer, throat cancer, and more. But what is less known is its connection to diabetes. Smoking worsens insulin resistance, damages blood vessels, and makes diabetes harder to control and treat. For our communities where both cancer and diabetes rates are rising, tobacco is quietly making both conditions worse. And the danger does not stop with the person who smokes. Asian American teens are 15% less likely to discuss tobacco with a healthcare professional, meaning that secondhand exposure within families and homes goes underaddressed, silently affecting children, elders, and everyone in between. Next slide, please. This hidden impact is not happening by chance. The tobacco industry has deliberately targeted Asian American communities, sponsoring cultural festivals, advertising in Asian languages, placing more tobacco ads, and fewer health warnings in our neighborhoods. Today, that same predatory playbook is being used for vaping, with flavored products and social media campaigns aimed directly at our youth. The environment our community lives in, the billboards, the stores, the digital spaces, is saturated with tobacco messaging. That is an environmental impact too, and we cannot just ignore it. Next slide, please. Vaping is the newest and perhaps the most, the previous one. Thank you. Vaping is the newest and perhaps most hidden face of this crisis. It is sleek, flavored, falsely perceived as safe. We got all of the flavors out there. We got mango, blueberry, and menthol. And just this month, I believe that the FDA approved new flavored vaping products, making them more accessible than ever. I think the science is clear because vaping causes nicotine addiction, high blood pressure, asthma, lung, and heart disease, all of which compound existing cancer and diabetes risks. And with today's financial pressures, housing instability, and academic stress, our youth are turning to nicotine as a coping mechanism before they even understand the consequences. Next slide, please. I wanted to share something personal because community always starts with lived experience. My uncle, who grew up in China, has smoked for most of his life, and like so many in our communities, nobody around him ever questioned it. Tobacco was simply part of the daily life, a gesture of socializing, of hospitality of being an adult man in Chinese culture. Years later, he developed lung disease, and even then, the conversation in our family was not easy to have. We did not want to cause shame. We did not want to point fingers. That is what saving face looks like in practice, and that silence has a real cost. Research confirms that what my family lived. Studies show that in many Asian communities, tobacco use is deeply normalized through cultural tradition, gender expectations, and social bonding, making it far harder to recognize as a health risk until the damage is already done. And when the person affected is someone you love, you understand why community-based conversations, not just clinical warnings, are the only thing that can truly change their behavior. This is not a failure of our communities. It is a call for our communities to lead the change. Next slide, please. And that is precisely what community-based work is for. At APEAL, we believe the most powerful intervention against tobacco's hidden impact is not a clinical program alone. It is a trusted community member who likes you, speaks your language, and understands the cultural silences that allow tobacco to hide. We train community health workers and trusted messengers to bring this conversation into cultural gatherings, faith communities, and family spaces, because that is where hearts and minds actually change. When communities are informed, connected, and supported, they become the most powerful force to prevention. Next slide, please. So what exactly do we do together? We name the hidden impact on cancer, on diabetes, on our environment, on our families. We create safe spaces for community to talk openly about tobacco without the shame. We train trusted messengers from within our own communities. We engage youth to gently reach their parents and grandparents, maybe in culturally respectable ways. And we demand accountability. Big tobacco earns $500 billion a year. Those tax dollars must come back to our communities, funding multilingual secession programs and lung cancer screening accessible to all. Because tobacco impact is hidden, but our community power is not. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Safi. You put that so wonderfully, and thank you so much for sharing your expertise. We will now transition towards the panel discussion. I first want to open up questions to the audience. Do you guys have any questions for either Joseph or Safi about tobacco cessation, lung cancer screening, tobacco prevention? Yeah. Your question or your don't smoke? Yes, 100%. Don't consume tobacco products in general. Alrighty, but no worries. I have some questions to ask our panelists. And so first I'll start with big tobacco makes $500 billion in revenue every single year. And oftentimes they employ pretty predatory tactics, especially with the marginalized and vulnerable communities. And that keeps people hooked on their products. When people are ready to quit, they're met with many challenges. How do you think we should hold the tobacco industry responsible for education, community outreach, cessation, and lung cancer screenings and treatment caused by tobacco usage?
Well, unfortunately, some of the tactics they've used have been to develop so-called safer products like vapes, and so I don't know if we can ever trust them to manage it themselves. I think the programs that have worked best are the ones that take the settlement funds and have it directed by the states. Unfortunately, right now, with the Office of Smoking and Health being completely wiped out by the current administration, a lot of states that don't have the smoking cessation resources within their own governmental, within their state governments, basically have no cessation funds right now. California, of course, has been a leader. I tell people in California, you're already paying for smoking cessation. If you go to the California Kick It site, you can get texts and you can get support on the phone. You can get emails. Any way that you want the support to quit, it's already being paid for by California taxpayers. So fortunately, we do have that here.
Yes, that is perfect. Thank you so much for that response. And I'm sure it resonated with a lot of our audience members and maybe their feelings. Safi, do you have anything to add?
Yes. I would like to touch a little bit from our side as appeal. I think the question you ask is really good because I think that statistic alone says everything. $500 billion in revenue built significantly on addiction, and the communities in this room and the families we serve are part of that equation. They are the ones who got cooked, who got sick, and who are now navigating lung cancer screening, cessation programs, and treatment, often without enough support. So how do we kind of hold them accountable? I think first through policy. We need legislation that requires tobacco and vaping companies to contribute directly to public health funds, specifically designated for prevention, education, and community outreach and cessation programs. I think tobacco settlement funds has existed since 1990s, but the question is whether these dollars were actually reaching the communities that needs them most, including Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities were too often left out of the mainstream funding streams, right? Secondly, I think through transparency, these companies must publicly disclose how they're marketing their products, who they are actually targeting, and which communities are being most exposed. because for right now, much of that marketing is happening quietly, I would say, on social media through influencers in language other than English, reaching our communities without accountability. Third, I think through community power. When communities are educated, well organized, and vocal, they become the most powerful force for accountability. And very informed, connected community is one of the industry cannot just ignore. And that is where organizations like Appeal come in. We kind of help communities understand their rights, their risks, and their voice. I believe lung cancer screening and cessation support must be fully funded and made accessible to everyone, regardless of language, insurance, and immigration status. If the industry's products cause the harm, the industry must help fund the healing.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful response. And I believe with both what Joseph and Safi said is how important policy is. Remember to vote. Remember to really dive into what local policies affect you guys, as well as statewide and even federally and nationally. Education is everything, and there's a lot of information out there. So we encourage you to understand what can affect you through policy and vote in your health and your community's health best interest. And I will ask one final question. In many Asian cultures, topics like cancer and smoking can be sensitive. What cultural factors, like stigma or saving face, most affect decisions about quitting or addressing tobacco exposure?
I don't mind just saying one quick thing that I've learned over the years is that perhaps one of the most respectful ways of addressing it is letting people who smoke know that it is others around them that they are harming. Because sometimes if you just say you should quit for your own health so that you can live a long life is not enough. It's when their loved ones are affected. I know I grew up in a household where I got constant ear infections and voila, it's because my father was a chimney and we didn't have the wherewithal to speak to him about it. And after many years of smoking in our faces, he realized that it was harming us. And I think is much more effective than just haranguing him the way I did and begging him to quit for his own health.
Yeah, absolutely. It has a very personal impact for a lot of people, not only in this room, I'm sure, but also in our communities. And Safi, did you want to mention anything else?
Yeah, I want to thank you first for this question because it's so close to my heart. I believe that in many Asian American communities, tobacco use has been normalized for generations. It is social, it is polite, it is what the men in the family do after dinner. And because of that deep normalization, bringing it up feels like an accusation, like to the person itself. Nobody wants to like kind of shame a family member, right? Nobody wants to disrupt the harmony of the household. That is kind of saving face in practice. And what happens as a result? People often stay quiet, silent. A grandmother, it might be a grandmother, breathes in secondhand smoke every evening and says, "Oh, it's nothing." Or it might be a teenager watches their father smoke and thinks this must be acceptable. I think that is why the silence become inherited. So what we need to do is gently reframe the conversation. Instead of just pointing fingers, we invite families to protect each other. Instead of calling tobacco a personal failure, we call it a community health issue that deserves a community response. I think when trusted messengers from within our own communities, people who understand these cultural dynamics from the inside are the ones who can open these doors in ways that clinical programs simply just cannot.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I feel like the moral of this tobacco panel is to meet smoking and vaping as well as other tobacco consumption with compassion and understanding. Empathy goes a long way, but also understanding that there are evidence-based solutions out there. There are effective ways to quit tobacco products. So there is hope in stopping. Thank you so much to our panelists, Joseph Hayden and Safi Zhu.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.